Today on Questions Answered, we're talking about road bikes versus gravel bikes. And the number one question is, what's the difference between a road bike and a gravel bike? I think we should break that out a little bit and talk about what is a road bike first. And a road bike is the most efficient and fast kind of bike for the road. And the things that allow it to be fast and efficient are thin tires, usually between 25 and 28 millimeter wide for a modern road bike, narrow drop-style handlebars that have multi-positions for comfort and aerodynamics for long, fast rides, and usually an aggressive riding position and aggressive steep angles on the bike, which give it tight handling and a fast and efficient riding position for the rider. And a gravel bike, on the other hand, takes some of those things and makes them more off-road worthy. So in a lot of ways, a gravel bike sits between a mountain bike and a road bike. So if we look at a mountain bike, which is sort of the other end of that spectrum, you have wide, knobby tires, powerful brakes, disc brakes, and a frame with slacker angles for more control on loose and rough surfaces, and also a more upright riding position. So a gravel bike can kind of sit anywhere within that spectrum, but splits the difference between mountain and road. So it has slightly narrower tires than a mountain bike, with some amount of knobs, drop-style handlebars in most cases, like a road bike, so that you're more aerodynamic, but yet a more upright riding position than a pure road bike. Usually more powerful disc-style brakes, like a mountain bike. Some modern gravel bikes even incorporate some suspension. Mountain bikes use usually longer travel suspension for rough terrain. Some gravel bikes now even incorporate a front suspension fork, or some even crazy ones have rear suspension as well. Gravel bikes can kind of sit anywhere on that spectrum, so there's more race-oriented gravel bikes that take aerodynamics into account more and have a more aggressive riding position and usually thinner tires. And then there's more sort of adventure-focused gravel bikes that have wider, knobbier tires, often wider and flared drop-style handlebars, or even flat bars, and mounting points that allow for touring, comfort, and more versatility on rough terrain without that efficiency that you find on the road end of the spectrum. For examples of these bikes, you can find road racing bikes out in any criterium race or a road race like the Tour de France. And while Priority doesn't make a road racing bike, we do make a track bike, which has some of the same characteristics in thin tires, drop handlebars, steep angles, and an aggressive riding position. And it's a bike purely for the road or for on a road style course. Priority Bicycles makes the Apollo, which sits somewhere closer to the road end of the spectrum of gravel bikes in that it has a more comfortable riding position than a road bike, but certainly a more aggressive position than a mountain bike. Relatively narrow handlebars with a bit of flair, and tires that allow for use on a fair amount of gravel, but are also pretty efficient on the road. It's also geared more like a road bike is. So it has relatively high gearing, which allows you to maintain a high rate of speed on relatively smooth gravel and on road. Priority Bicycles also makes the Gemini, which is a bicycle that sits a little further along in the spectrum towards a mountain bike. It can fit a wider tire than the Apollo. It has some slacker angles for more stability and a more upright riding position in comparison, and allows the mounting of a bit more gear on there for some adventure touring. While we're on the topic of bikes with drop-style handlebars and wide knobby tires, it's worth mentioning cyclocross bikes, which evolved out of road cycling a long time ago, and have to adhere to some specific rules for cyclocross racing specifically. And if you look at them, they're a lot closer to road bikes than most gravel bikes. The tires can only be up to 33 millimeters wide, the handlebars can only be so wide, and they use a higher top tube so that riders can shoulder the bike and jump over obstacles in a cyclocross race. So they end up being quite a bit closer to road bikes and don't do some of the things that gravel bikes do in terms of fitting a much wider tire, having wider flared bars, or a sloped top tube, or being able to fit a bunch of gear on them for various types of riding. It's sort of a specific niche of bike. So the next question is, can you ride road on a gravel bike? And the answer is largely yes. You can ride a gravel bike on the road. And that is one of the big advantages of a gravel bike, is that it's really versatile. So you can ride it on roads, on rough roads, on smooth gravel, on rough gravel, and even on some mountain bike trails, depending on what kind of setup you have. So a gravel bike can be super versatile for various types of riding. But it's not a bike that you would want to use in a road race, let's say. And a lot of that just comes down to efficiency. And that's because road bikes are really, really designed around being as efficient as possible for that type of racing or that type of riding. So even if you, let's say, put a really narrow tire on a gravel bike, and there might be some issues with most gravel bikes' rims in doing that, but if you were able to put a really narrow tire on a gravel bike, it would still feel sluggish compared to a road bike, because usually the gearing's different, the riding position's less efficient, and the angles on the bike make it feel less snappy and less tight handling for that type of riding. But that doesn't mean you can't go out there on a group ride on a gravel bike and still go pretty fast and have a great time. And the inverse of that question is, can you ride gravel on a road bike? And the answer is kind of. You might not have that great a time, and I think the big limitation with road bikes is really the tire clearance and the stability of the angles of the geometry of the bike. I have personally ridden gravel on a road bike before, and it's been fun, but you're also more likely to get flats with narrow tires. You're less likely to get grip on looser stuff with narrower tires, and you kind of have to fight the bike a little bit to keep it stable and keep it on track when things get really loose. So it's possible, just you might not have as much fun as you would on a gravel bike. In reality, you can ride any bike on the road and be okay. You just kind of go slower if it's more geared towards off-road. Whereas it can be pretty dangerous if you take a bike that's designed for the road out of its element on really rough terrain that it's really not designed to handle. And finally, what are the things I should consider when choosing between the two categories of bike? Well, I think it's really important to consider who you're going to be riding with, where you're going to be riding, and what kind of experience you want to have. If you are considering racing, or you have a group of friends that goes on fast, long road rides, and it is carrying a high rate of speed and is all on road bikes, you should get a road bike, because that's going to be the most fun for that kind of riding and the best application for that bike. But you probably shouldn't expect that bike will be capable of performing off-road. On the other hand, if you're planning some adventure touring, or maybe you're not really sure if you're going to be riding on or off-road, or you just kind of want the capability of doing both, then a gravel bike is an awesome choice for that. One other thought along those lines is that it's really hard to find a bike that does everything well. So I think you'll find a lot of cyclists out there who have multiple bikes, and that's because a road bike is awesome for riding on the road. It's the best kind of bike for doing it. Similarly, a gravel bike is fantastic for gravel and riding fast off-road. So you can't really expect them to be equally good at the opposite thing. So if you want an awesome bike for various kinds of riding, you might need two bikes. Personally, if I had to choose between having a road bike or having a gravel bike, I would pick a gravel bike, and I think a lot of people are going that direction these days because it's just more versatile. I've gotten to the point where I don't do any road racing, and I don't plan to, but I really love to get out there and go fast, and I can still do that on a gravel bike, on-road or off-road. And I can take the same bike, load it up with a bunch of bike packing gear, and get out for the weekend or for a week if I want to. And I couldn't do that on a road bike. So that's my choice. But post in the comments, what's your choice? If you have any other questions as well, post those and we'll address them in a future video. Thanks for watching.